Nobody expected this confrontation to end the way it did. Beneath crystal chandeliers and surrounded by the city's wealthiest families, a billionaire stood at the altar waiting for the woman he had chosen to spend the rest of his life with. Guests adjusted their designer outfits and whispered among themselves, expecting the arrival of a glamorous heiress or a famous socialite. Instead, the doors opened and the room fell into stunned silence. The bride wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't born into privilege. She was the maid who once cleaned the floors of his mansion. Shock spread across the audience like wildfire. Some stared in disbelief. Others exchanged judgmental glances, convinced there had to be an explanation. How could one of the most powerful men in the country marry someone society barely acknowledged? Too many. This wasn't romance. It was rebellion. She walked forward with quiet dignity, refusing to lower her eyes beneath the weight of public scrutiny. Meanwhile, those who had spent years chasing the billionaire's fortune struggled to hide their outrage. Their smiles tightened, their whispers sharpened. In their world, love had rules, and she had broken every single one. But the billionaire never hesitated. Looking directly at the woman everyone underestimated, he reached for her hand. The crowd thought they were witnessing a scandal. They had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of a story that would challenge everything they believed about status, worth, and who deserves a happily ever after. But the real story began long before cameras started rolling, long before she became the woman standing at the altar. She was simply a daughter trying to hold her family together, while others her age dreamed of luxury and escape. She woke before sunrise and worked until exhaustion settled deep into her bones. Every paycheck had a purpose. Rent, groceries, medicine, survival, life had taught her that dignity wasn't something you inherited. It was something you protected through sacrifice, even when nobody noticed. She never asked for sympathy. She didn't cut corners. She treated every person with respect, whether they held power or none at all. Integrity guided her choices when dishonesty might have offered an easier path. Service wasn't weakness in her eyes. It was strength. Resilience wasn't inspirational language for social media posts. It was the reason she kept moving forward after every setback. Then she entered the billionaire's mansion. He lived in a world built on exclusivity and influence. People praised him in public while calculating what they could gain behind closed doors. Business partners admired profit more than principles. Social elites measured human worth by family names and bank accounts. They considered kindness naive and humility forgettable. Years of wealth had surrounded him with carefully crafted performances. Beautiful smiles concealed ambition. Loyalty disappeared when convenience demanded it. He had power, but power had also isolated him. Without realizing it, he had become accustomed to expecting the worst from people. From the beginning, their worlds were destined to collide. She returned expensive items others might have stolen. She defended co-workers who couldn't defend themselves. She spoke honestly, even when silence would have been safer. Her authenticity unsettled those who benefited from manipulation. Inside the mansion, whispers began. Some staff members admired her quiet courage. Others called her foolish. Online, people who caught glimpses of their unusual interactions quickly divided into opposing camps. Some celebrated the possibility that character could transcend class. Others mocked the idea, insisting people should stay in their assigned places. Interest grew. Opinions hardened. What began as ordinary curiosity slowly transformed into something much larger than either of them. This wasn't just about a maid and a billionaire anymore. It became a collision between two beliefs, that human value is earned through character, or purchased through status. Neither side intended to surrender, but nobody realized the situation was about to spiral completely out of control. The rumors that had once lingered in quiet corners of the mansion finally burst into the open. What had started as harmless speculation transformed into a full-scale spectacle. Staff members exchanged knowing looks. Wealthy acquaintances whispered behind champagne glasses. The billionaire's inner circle demanded answers. To them, his growing affection for a maid wasn't romantic. It was humiliating. Then came the confrontation that changed everything. That at an exclusive gathering, attended by influential guests, one of the billionaire's longtime associates decided to say what others had only hinted at. With a smile sharp enough to wound, she questioned the maid's intentions in front of everyone. "Do you really expect us to believe this isn't about money?" she asked. "People like her don't fall in love with billionaires. They find opportunities." The room grew silent. Another voice joined in, accusing her of manipulating a lonely man. Someone suggested she had planned this from the beginning. Others implied she didn't belong in the same room as them, let alone beside one of the country's most desirable men. Every insult carried the same message: know your place. The billionaire watched the humiliation unfold. Part of him wanted to silence every critic immediately, but before he could speak, the woman at the center of the storm lifted her head. She didn't shout, she didn't cry, and she refused to beg for acceptance. With remarkable composure, she looked directly at those tearing her apart and said that if wealth was all she wanted, integrity would have been far too expensive a price to pay. She reminded them that dignity cannot be purchased in character, cannot be inherited through privilege. Her calm unsettled them more than anger ever could. Instead of backing down, the critics doubled down. Tabloids began publishing speculative headlines. Commentators questioned her motives. Influencers took opposing sides. Viral clips of the confrontation flooded social media feeds, turning private pain into public entertainment. Some viewers condemned the elite's cruelty. Others insisted the critics were simply protecting the billionaire from exploitation. Families debated the story across dinner tables. Friends argued in group chats. Millions projected their own beliefs onto a woman they had never met. Meanwhile, pressure closed in from every direction. Business advisors warned the billionaire that his reputation was at risk. Social connections threatened to distance themselves. The people who claimed to care about him demanded he choose status over sentiment. Then came the betrayal neither of them expected. Fearing she had become the source of chaos in his life, the maid quietly made her decision. She thanked him for every kindness he had shown her and prepared to walk away. She would not allow love to become another weapon used against him. As she turned to leave, the billionaire realized that losing public approval frightened him far less than losing the one person who had never asked him to become someone else. And just when it seemed impossible for the story to become more unbelievable, a single revelation changed everything. Just when the story seemed destined to end in heartbreak, the narrative began to crack in ways no one expected. As the maid quietly disappeared from the mansion, people who had once remained silent started speaking up. An elderly housekeeper revealed how she had stayed after long shifts to help co-workers finish their duties without seeking recognition. A former employee shared how the young woman had used part of her modest earnings to assist colleagues facing financial hardship. Others recalled moments when she could have taken advantage of opportunities placed before her but chose honesty instead. Piece by piece, a different picture emerged. The accusations that had spread so easily suddenly collided with uncomfortable facts. Even more damaging was what surfaced about the people who had attacked her character. Private messages exposed calculated attempts to secure the billionaire's attention for personal gain. Business associates who preached respect were revealed to have prioritized profit over loyalty. Those who claimed to defend his best interests had quietly benefited from his trust, while betraying it behind closed doors for the first time. The villains of the story found themselves under the same scrutiny they had eagerly directed toward someone else. Public perception began to shift. Comment sections exploded with outrage and reflection. People admitted they had judged too quickly. Others recognized pieces of their own experiences in hers. Immigrants, working-class families, caregivers, and overlooked individuals saw something painfully familiar in the way she had been dismissed before anyone cared to know her truth. Online sentiment transformed from suspicion into support. Meanwhile, the billionaire found himself replaying every interaction they had shared. He remembered her refusing expensive gifts. He remembered her defending people with less power than herself. Most of all, he remembered how she had chosen to walk away rather than compromise her values. Determined not to let fear make the decision for him, he searched for the woman everyone else had underestimated. When he finally stood before her, there were no grand audiences or flashing cameras. "You were the first person who saw me as a human being instead of a fortune," he confessed, "and I was foolish enough to almost lose you." For a brief moment, hope replaced heartbreak. But forgiveness wasn't guaranteed, and love alone couldn't silence the voices still demanding that he choose status over sincerity, because the final decision would leave the entire country divided. The wedding guests waited for hesitation that never came. After weeks of public scrutiny, accusations, and endless debate, the billionaire made his choice in front of everyone who had insisted he choose differently. He walked toward the woman who had once entered his mansion through the servants' entrance and took her hand without apology. The room held its breath. Some people looked away in disapproval. Others watched with tears in their eyes. The elite who had mocked her remained frozen behind practiced smiles, forced to confront a truth they had spent their lives denying. Character could not be measured by status when offered every opportunity to expose those who had humiliated her. She chose restraint over revenge. She didn't demand apologies. She didn't celebrate their embarrassment. She stood with quiet grace, proving that dignity becomes most powerful when it refuses to imitate cruelty. The consequences reached far beyond the wedding hall. Business allies who had manipulated trust lost credibility. Social climbers who disguised ambition as concern found themselves exposed. Their influence weakened not because they were defeated by wealth or power, but because ordinary people recognized hypocrisy when they saw it. Across social media, reactions poured in from every corner. Many wrote that this wasn't just a love story. It was about every person who had ever been underestimated because of where they came from, how they spoke, or what they lacked. Parents shared it with their children. Friends debated it late into the night. Others admitted they had once judged people by job titles and appearances, only to realize how easily fear disguises itself as superiority. For countless viewers, her story offered validation that perseverance and integrity still matter, even in systems designed to overlook them, and that kindness remains a form of resistance when the world rewards cynicism and rewards those who fit in rather than stand apart with honor intact. Who truly won? Not the people obsessed with appearances. Not the voices demanding conformity. The real victory belonged to courage, humility, and the refusal to surrender self-worth for acceptance. Their marriage became a reminder that justice often depends on ordinary people choosing principle when compromise feels easier. Character matters. Courage inspires others. Dignity is strength. In a world obsessed with being loud, sometimes the most powerful act is refusing to surrender your dignity. And that's why this story will be remembered long after the headlines fade. What would you have done if you were in that position?